Pozdravljamo dragoceno gostjo in današnji dogodek v Mariboru soorganizirata tudi Lutkovno gledališče Maribor in pa Mariborska knjižnica. Now to our dear guest, Susan Abulhawa. Very welcome to Maribor. We are very happy and honored to host you here.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. And thank you all for coming.
So, Susan, most of us know you now very well. You are a Palestinian writer, poet, scientist, feminist, animal rights supporter, and also, as you said yourself, a general troublemaker. You were born to refugee parents, Palestinian refugee parents, refugees from the 1967 war that Israel inflicted on Palestine and occupied the Palestinian land. And you were born in Kuwait. Your family is originally from East Jerusalem.
Correct.
And you lived there for a little bit after you moved from Kuwait, and then you moved to United States, where you are living at the moment. So a lot of people from Slovenia, so Slovenian audience, Slovenian readers, got familiarized with the Nakba and the occupation and apartheid through your book, Mornings in Jenin. It got reprinted 3 times in Slovenian translation, and most of the people would not know the details of the Palestinian story if it weren't for your book. And you already wrote that book in 2006, and it was translated to Slovenian a few years ago. And you wrote it basically after you visited Jenin in 2002, after the massacre of 2002. And after you wrote the book was heavily censored. You were put under pressure by Zionists. You lost your job as a scientist. But maybe just tell us what was what was the need to write the book after you visited Jenin in 2002?
So first of all, thank you all for filling this theater. It means a lot to me and it's very humbling, honestly, to hear what you said. It was actually surprising. I didn't realize the extent and the reach of Mornings in Jenin in Slovenia. So I'm really honored to be here. I'm really grateful for the stand that Slovenia has taken, for your solidarity, at least with the Eurovision. It means something. Forgive me, I have a bit of a cough. The journey for Mornings in Jenin began with the second Intifada. I'm a scientist by training, and could I ask for like something hot, because I'm about to have a cough. I apologize. I've been having this weird cough, and hot water seems to help it. Apologies, but the second Intifada started in the United States, and I realized that what was being reported in the media bore no resemblance to the reality that I knew was happening on the ground. And yeah, thank you. Yeah, hot water seems to help. Sorry, this is I've been talking so much lately in the past. I was in Ravenna before, and then I start to get this tickle in my throat, and it's followed by a coughing fit, and I'm really sorry. But anyway, so when the massacre was happening in Jenin, I decided to, as a single mom at the time, I was working as a as a scientist, and my daughter was quite young, but I just took my measly 2 weeks American vacation, and I went to Jenin. And what I witnessed there, just changed my life completely. I mean, I had never before witnessed this kind of carnage. I'd never smelled death so closely. I'd never seen, I'd never heard stories like that before, like the things that I heard from the people who survived it, people who watched their their loved ones get buried under the rubble, like with tanks were running over homes. And I went back to the United States, and I had all these images of Janine in my head and all these stories that were going through my head, and I suddenly found myself back in this milieu of privilege and a job with a corporation, and it was just really difficult to reconcile. And I remember, but I also, like, I wasn't making much money. I was a single mom. I didn't have savings. I didn't have family in the United States. And I remember thinking, like, I prayed. I don't really usually pray, but I was like, just God, show me, put me where I need to be, and because I felt like I was in the wrong place in my life. And then it didn't take long for me to get fired. So it was strangely answered prayer, but it was really terrifying. And it was just a couple of days before Christmas. And I remember that first day I cried and cried. And I didn't know what to do, except so I just started writing, and I was writing and writing, and then the next day I was writing, and then I decided to mortgage my house. I went into debt, which was really crazy, and I don't know why. When I think back, I don't know what kind of crazy took over me, but I just kept writing. At some point, I decided that this was going to be a novel. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I was just sort of driven by this impulse to, it's born really of powerlessness, and it's something I feel now, and I know that all Palestinians feel it. It's this feeling of profound injustice, and it's almost like having to exist in a room where everybody's drunk and you're the only sober person and nobody knows that they're drunk, and you can't convince them of everything. You just have to survive it. And that's kind of how it feels like. And it's this feeling of impotence compounded with injustice, and you don't know what to do. And for me, I found this outlet in creative expression in writing, and but it never feels like enough. I felt it when I went into Gaza. I feel it now, but it really means a lot to know that these characters that I created, early mornings, late nights, thinking about them in the shower, driving in the car, whatever, that they have entered your lives and entered the lives of people all around the world, and maybe are making that room a little less drunk.
But your confidence in your writings, so someone who made you believe that you could be a writer, was, I believe, Hanan Ashrawi, the Palestinian icon.
Yeah, so there were a few things that happened leading up to that. During when the second Intifada started, and I never imagined myself as a writer. I don't come from a particularly educated family. My family were farmers. My grandmother was illiterate. My uncle was the first person to go to college. I didn't have books growing up, although I remember craving them and really trying to find books. So to me, like, I never imagined that I could be a writer. It was almost like, it was just something unattainable. It was almost like, wanting to be the Queen of England when I grow up. It felt like that, so far. So, but when the second Intifada happened, I started writing letters to the editor. And then I started, and this was like kind of the beginning of the internet. And there were all these independent media outlets that were popping up online. And I started writing for them. I started writing for some major newspapers. And and it surprised me that people were, editors were wanting my pieces, and it gave me the courage to, enter a writing contest. I did, and I won the top prize. And I wrote a few essays that were personal, and one of them was read by Dr. Hanan Ashrawi, a Palestinian icon that I looked up to very much. And she just sent me this one-line email that said, this story is something to the effect, is profoundly moving, it's very human. It sounds like you could write a top-rate narrative. Have you ever thought about it? And of course, I was like fangirling. I was like, oh my God, Hanan Ashrawi thinks I can write. So I internalized that. And I had also internalized Edward Said's lament that Palestinian stories were missing in Western literature. So that, the two of those things combined, together with, winning that writing contest and then losing my job and not knowing what to do with my life and where I was going to go, and just sort of sitting in this feeling of despair and impotence and not knowing what to do. And that's where it began. I just started writing and writing and writing and writing, and yeah. And then it was done, and then there was a whole journey of trying to get it published, and it's kind of like it. And when I try to think about the, what the hell made me think I could do something, it's really interesting to even contemplate. But yeah, I'm glad I was crazy in that moment. I'm glad I didn't think too hard about it and just went for it.
But I believe this since Mornings in Jenin, this is 20 years ago that you wrote the book approximately. You have probably changed as a person and as a writer.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I think I've matured as a writer, and I've certainly changed as a person, as a woman, as a Palestinian. I think Mornings in Jenin, compared to my last novel, and certainly compared to the novel that's coming out next year, is more forgiving. It's more accepting of coexistence and the possibility of coexistence. I don't feel that way anymore. My last novel, I think, is more militant. It is angrier. I'm certainly even angrier than my last novel. I think watching 3 years of an ongoing genocide, having seen it up close, seeing something that dwarfs what I saw in Jenin by 1,000 folds, I don't feel forgiving. I am angry. I am outraged. I am, like everybody else, in pain. I want accountability. I want Israel to pay in some way for what they have done for the past 80 years. And certainly what they've done in the past 3 years. It's hard to, I had a few interviews since I've been in Slovenia, and I keep reiterating that it's hard to really capture in words the enormity of the harm. I keep running up against the limits of language, the limits of words, the all-consuming. It's almost like, when you all see the kind of images of this kind of spectacular violence, just the gore and so forth. It's really such a small glimpse of the enormity of the carnage. When you're there, it's not framed in a phone on a screen. It's all around you. There are sensory assaults from it's visual, it's auditory, the constant buzz of the zanane above you. But most of all, there are smells that haunt you, that haunt me still. Like there's of course there's the smell of death. There's people buried under the rubble that nobody can get to, and you know they're there and you can smell them. You can smell the rot of life. There is this pervasive dust because the destruction is so extensive that the dust never settles. So there's this haze of dust, and you breathe it in and you feel it in your lungs. There's the smell of human beings so packed, so close together, people who have not been able to bathe in weeks, even months for some people, because there's no water, there's barely enough water to drink. There's the smell of this concoction of oil that people made in order to power cars, whatever vehicles are left, because even ambulances, because there's no fuel coming in, and it's really gross and toxic and sticky, and it's on your hands, it's in your hair, and you breathe it in, and you know it gets in your lungs, and you know it's going to cause damage, and there's this knowing that I may recover, but the people who stay in Gaza are going to breathe this in, and there's going to be really terrible lung diseases in a few years popping up. And you think of the kids, and you see their faces, and it's unlike the face of any child. It's a perverted, it's an altered childhood. It's a non-childhood face on a child. And so, like, there's no adjectives to capture this, except to just try and describe it as best as I can. But it's still not enough, and I know that I can't fully convey it. And then on the other hand, I don't have enough bad words to describe the people who are doing this. I've never... human beings have done terrible things to each other throughout history. There have been atrocities committed. But I don't think there has been another moment in history when nearly an entire society has looked at the scenes that we're all witnessing and thought and found pleasure in it and set it to music and put it on TikTok and posted images of crimes on dating profiles. And mocked the pain of mothers and mocked the pain of children who are hungry. Nazis at least hid what they were doing, and Germans had plausible deniability. They could say we didn't know. Because seeing things visually provokes the conscience of normal people. I've used the example of Emmett Till. I don't know if you know who he is. He was, during the civil rights movement, there was a young boy by the name of Emmett Till who was visiting his aunt in the South. And he was a young black boy, and he was accused by a white woman of whistling at her. And so the relatives of this white woman took this little boy who was maybe 13 or 14 years old. They beat him so badly. They beat him to death. And then they threw him in the river. They tied him to an industrial fan. They threw him in the river. And when they retrieved his body, he was so disfigured, he didn't even look human. And his mother, Mrs. Till, decided to have an open casket. She had an open casket in the United States when the whole country was intensely racist, when it was openly white supremacist, and even unapologetically open white supremacist. But when these hardcore racists saw the images of Emmett in that casket, how disfigured he was, next to a photo of what he looked like when he was alive, this beautiful little boy with this bright smile. Even these hardened racists could not abide that kind of cruelty, because there's something about seeing cruelty, the visual impact of it, especially against children, that provokes the conscience. But that does not appear to be the case with Israeli society. And I have to say, that has been a surprise to me. And it is something that I will never forgive. It has also been a surprise to me to know that, to see the statistics among American Jews who continue to support this. I will also never forgive that. And so, to circle back to your question, yes, I am a far angrier person than I was when I wrote the first book. Unapologetically so. I am enraged, and I like that feeling. It empowers me. My anger empowers me, and I know I get criticized for the things I say, because I call them demons, because I call them monsters and parasites, and I can't find a word bad enough to describe them. But I reject the idea that that Palestinians should watch what we say.
I think I completely agree. Yeah. But you said before that you have also been influenced by Edward Said, who is, I think, was a person, and I mean still is, someone that opened eyes of many people to this really Eurocentric, Orientalistic view towards the Middle East or the global South. But you also said that you have been also influenced by Frantz Fanon, especially black skin, white masks. And this is also maybe visible in Mornings in Jenin, or when Amal says, there is one sentence she says to David, you have lived a stranger in your own skin. And also somewhere she also says, my foreignness showed in my brown skin and accent. How does that connect to what you have been saying, and also to the Palestinian struggle?
Yeah, like I as a writer, as a thinker, as a woman, I evolved by reading the giants before me, and among them has been Frantz Fanon. It has been Edward Said. It's the courage of people like Harriet Tubman, of Stephen Sobukwe, Robert Sobukwe, and Stephen Biko, Malcolm X, and James Baldwin. All of these thinkers before me inform the person that I am now, as somebody who understands that the real divisions that exist among societies they're not linguistic divisions, they're not nationalistic divisions, they are not racial divisions, religious divisions, geographic divisions. The real divisions are they are moral divisions, and they are class divisions. They are the difference between the people who look at our children and think they want more, and the people who risk their freedom and risk their lives to make it stop. It's the difference between the people who go to Epstein Island and hide the evidence, and the rest of humanity. And I think, this is what I hope that can come across to societies everywhere. because we are so, especially people in the West, I think, because there you kind of you live with these ideas that of democracy and free speech and so forth. I think Western societies see themselves in their leaders. And it's a big difference in how the global South see themselves and their leaders. We feel very separate from our leaders. We don't agree that they represent us. They don't say us and then we feel like we are part of them. Because we don't have these delusions of democracy. We don't have these delusions of free speech and all the, but I think Westerners do, and they believe in these things, and you believe that you have them. And so there is an identification that happens. So like Americans will identify, with Donald Trump, for example, or people, in the State Department who say things and because they believe that it's a democracy, they believe that we have free speech. But I think one of the things that Gaza has done is to pull down the masks, because now people in the West are hitting at the limits of that free speech. They're starting to understand that actually if I criticize Israel and if I protest in the street, I could be imprisoned, I could lose my job, I could get expelled from school. I could have my degree taken away from me. I could get a visit from the authorities. I could be put on trial. All of these things have happened to people who are daring to oppose genocide. And so Gaza, in essence, I feel like this shift in that we're seeing in public opinion throughout the West isn't just about the reality of what Israel is doing and what they have always done and what they're about. It's also about your own reality. It's about the limits of your own democracy, the limits of your own free speech. It's about who is installing or persuading your politicians. I understand, Black Cube is playing a role in your domestic realities even now. So I think this is one thing that Gaza, it's one of the masks that Gaza has pulled off. And, I hope it's sustained. I hope people will not unsee what they have seen, will not unlearn what they have learned.
Maybe let's turn a bit to the language, because language, as we all know, is very important. Is one of the symbols or one of the ways how to achieve power. And you write in English. However, I read that you think in Arabic, and also I think Arabic was the first language that you learned to write and read in. Yeah. And you also incorporate a lot of Arabic words into your writing, and also put special emphasis to Palestinian traditions, culturally important things. And you also, I think, almost always add a glossary to your books. And in Against the Loveless World, the glossary is not at the end of the novel, but it's a full 12 page at the beginning of the novel. Why that decision?
Believe it or not, I actually did not want it to be in the front. Okay. What I said was, I want to note that there is a glossary at the end. Okay. And they just kind of went with it, and it was too late to change it. So that was actually an accident, and it's just been sustained, and it's kind of annoying. And I apologize for it.
I think it's
but yeah, so the reason, like, when I'm writing, I think in Arabic, is only because the characters are communicating with each other in Arabic. And so part of the writing process is to enter their world and try and get to know them. Mm-hmm. And I can't get to know them if I'm thinking in English. And so my brain switches. However, because I left my Arabic education at a relatively young age, I was 13 when I went to the United States, my skills in the Arabic language were arrested at that age. and I don't have a sophisticated enough command of Arabic to write novels. Even though I can read and write Arabic, it's just, my command of language is much stronger in English, which is why I write in English. And it's actually one of my heartbreaks, to be honest, because Arabic is so poetically charged. I'm envious of, when I listen to Arabic poetry or read it, it's so beautiful, and I'm envious of those who can create it. And so, I mean, as a writer, it just, it's a bit of a heartache. But I'm grateful that I can still read and write it. But this is a condition of exile. This is one of the things that gets taken from you.
So if we go back to Against the Loveless World, it's I really loved the novel, and I think it's the character is like very fierce and much more independent, I felt, than the characters in Mornings in Jenin. But yeah, I think it's the fourth book after the.
It's the third novel.
The third novel.
It's a fourth. It is the
Forward,
fourth, but it's the third novel.
Yeah. But the starting point basically is sexual violence that Nar, the main character, experiences, and she is a woman that, and her, let's say, revolutionary consciousness awakens or comes out of patriarchy and male violence and colonialism. And I read an interesting review in Mondovai's magazine that said, I will quote them, that the most important contribution of the novel may be its radical and brave representations of the lives of Palestinian women. It is a tribute to the hundreds and thousands of faceless women who fought Zionists in the Nakba, carried weapons and relief during the first and second intifadas, and who often end up in prison. And the prisoner support and human rights group Adamir estimates that around 10,000 Palestinian women have been imprisoned since the 1967 war. So what drove you to explore this side of Palestinian history, the history of women, besides, of course, you being a woman and feeling that? And how did you decide that Nar narrates her story from prison?
So Nahid was kind of Nahid ends up being a sex worker at one point in her life. I want to sort of point that out. There is sexual violence, there is exploitation, of course. I wanted to write about this for a long time, and it was kind of almost 20 years in the making. But I didn't feel like I was mature enough as a writer. I wasn't mature enough as a person to approach this topic for many reasons. One of the reasons, and this harkens back to your previous question, which is that, because I write in English, my first readers are English speakers and English readers, of course. And with that comes an Orientalist context. There are Orientalist traps about Arab men, the kind of, oppressive, rapey, violent, Arab, angry, irrational man. And on the other hand, of the kind of passive, hypersexualized Arab woman. But it's still a topic that exists in our society. Misogyny, rape, exploitation of women, patriarchy, all of these things exist in every society. And of course, our society is no exception. And I wanted to write about it, but at the same time, avoid Orientalist traps, to tell the story honestly and authentically, but not in a way that notices a Western gaze, not in a way that even acknowledges a Western gaze, or an Orientalist gaze, I should say. And the other difficult or tricky part of this book was to write about a political prisoner. Political prisoners in our society are central to us. Most people, prisons for most societies are where criminals live, where the people that you want to keep away from society are kept. But for us, prisons are where our intellectuals are. It's where the freest people of our society exist. It's where our fighters and our revolutionaries exist. And so for us, political prisoners is an exalted place, and it's a very real and tortured place as well. So I was afraid of approaching this subject and messing it up. I did a lot of research, of course, and I had very different versions, and each time I felt like I'm gonna mess this up. Because it's so important, and which is why I decided to create this completely fictional cube. It's a prison, but it's completely fictionalized, and this way I didn't have to worry about perverting something real and messing it up. And what I was able to concentrate on, so I created this imaginary isolation prison, and then I could just concentrate on what I was beginning to understand, what I had researched, which is the psychology of isolation, the psychology of having no power over any part of your life, not even when or how you go to the bathroom, not even when you're completely surveilled, and you can't make any decision or have any power or any sovereignty over your own life, even your own body. And so then it became something really interesting as a writer, for a writer to do, is to explore this psychology and explore this woman who ended up as a political prisoner, and this woman who had been victimized in different ways all her life, but was still remained in possession of herself, remained in possession of her destiny. She was sassy, she was defiant, she was strong, she was smart, and I put this woman who might be considered in a lowly position as a sex worker, as somebody, the kind of woman that societies discard, the kind of woman that societies disrespect. And I put her in the most exalted place because she deserved to be there, because she did become a fighter, because she was defiant, and she was all of the wonderful things that I said she was. And and then I had friends who understand colonialism, they understand Orientalism, read it for me, and to give fresh eyes to look for Orientalist traps. So that's how I navigated that thing. And in the end, for me, the writing process is really in the rewriting. I mean, I think the early versions were total crap. I mean, all my early novels, like the first drafts, are just really embarrassingly bad. But it got, it's in the rewriting, and I finally got to a point where I felt proud of this book, and I loved the characters. I loved all of them.
And I think already on the first page you made me laugh a bit. I think it's you being very sarcastic, because this is, I will just read the names of the books that Nar has been given by the guards in Israeli prison. So they have given her Arabic translation of Schindler's List, a book with title How to Be Happy, and a book entitled Always Be Grateful. And I thought this is just great to start the book with humor, sarcasm.
Well, it's sarcasm, it's humor, but it also has another layer, because there's I don't know how it is for you, but in the United States, there's a whole industries of therapists and gurus and self-help books that basically tell you to be happy with what you got, that tell you should never be angry, that you that you just find acceptance, and you know, it doesn't matter if you lost your job and you can't afford your rent, and groceries are unaffordable, and your water's polluted, and the rich are just extracting your labor and taxing you to death, and you don't have health care. Find a way to be grateful. You know, this is how it is in the United States, and
we're getting
it's
there.
here too. Yeah, I'm sorry. So that part is really kind of hearkening to this reality that we are all being forced to live in.
The title, Against the Loveless World, is, you took it from James Baldwin, that you mentioned previously, to his letter to his nephew from, I think, 1962, something like that.
Yeah.
And I think...
The fire next time.
Yeah. And it's, I think it's almost like the title and this statement, Against the Loveless World, is almost like a banner we should all live under. It should be our guiding light. What made you choose this
So
title?
I can't take credit for the title. The original title that I came up with, which was completely unacceptable to any of my publishers, was Memoirs of a Revolutionary Whore. Yeah, you're all laughing. So that's what that was the reaction from everybody, and the publishers were like, no way. So we sat down and we were trying to figure out, I knew it wasn't going to be acceptable. And honestly, I wasn't sure that I wanted it either, but there was a part of me that liked it. And my publisher suggested, we came up with a long list, and this was my publisher's suggestion, my editor. And immediately I thought, yes, that's the one, because it was James Baldwin, because I love him so much. And because his work has meant so much to me in my life. And it worked. It captured, to me, it captured the spirit of Nahar's story.
In your novels, you also write about the environmental violence that Israelis inflict on Palestinian land. And also, I think the natural world is very present in your novels. You describe it a lot, and it plays an important role. And maybe specifically, we were talking a little bit about the oak tree outside of the puppet theater, and trees play an important role in Palestinian culture and in the landscape. And then this violence that it's inflicted upon the land, it's something that is, I think, another level of just getting the extra mile of being really cruel to the people, but to the animals also, and to the land directly.
I mean, as you know, I think indigenous societies, especially societies that are largely agrarian, have almost like a sacred connection to the land, to trees. It is like trees for Palestinian society, they're family members. Oftentimes when a child is born, an olive tree is planted in their name, and then the olive tree grows up with the child, and then there are trees next to it that are the grandparent trees, and so forth. And in many ways, even the olive trees in particular, they look like grandparents. They're gnarly. When the older they get, the more majestic and patient they look. They breathe life. They have a heartbeat to us, and it is like I can't tell you the kind of trauma that we feel when Israel comes through and uproots whole olive groves, or the settlers burn them or cut down the trees. They know how much it hurts us. They really do, and so they do it intentionally. It's kind of like when settlers came to North America, they started killing off the buffalo because the buffalo were sacred to Native Americans. They had this really special relationship. It wasn't just sustenance, it was spiritual. It was a symbiotic relationship, and settlers knew that and they understood it, and they systematically killed the buffalo. They almost exterminated them completely. And for us, Israel has been doing this to olive trees, and also to, to the natural world in general. Like, some examples are like the way, if you look at Palestinian villages, the way we built our homes, the homes would be nestled on the side of the hill. Like, you built your home according to the rock formation, according to the trees that were around it, and you squeezed your home into this space, and then you tried to create walkways or donkey ways or something to get you around. The way Zionist colonizers build is they first decapitate the hill. They cut off the top of the hill. It's a really violent process. It is so difficult to watch. And these are, hills that are forests. They're teeming with life. They are home to birds and insects and owls and snakes and all kinds of critters and hyenas and rabbits. So their homes are first destroyed and they are obliterated. They do this in order to create this European aesthetic of a flat surface, and then they plot their homes in perfect rows with big wide streets that they then decorate with imported trees and so forth. And it's just, to me, there is a violence in that. It's an aesthetic violence. It's an environmental violence. It's just total disregard for these land formations that were formed over billions of years, for trees that have existed for centuries at least, for whole species. Israel, like the early Zionists, created all these mythologies, and one of them was that they were making the desert bloom. Which, by the way, I just learned recently that they even stole that, because apparently South Africans before them had said that they did that. So making the desert bloom is actually a stolen slogan, but they said that they did it. But the reality was exactly an inversion. So much of their slogans are precise inversions of the truth. One of the first things that Israel did was to begin diverting water. They drained, because this, people who are indigenous to that region have a different relationship with water, because water, the plentifulness of water is cyclical. Some seasons there's a lot of water, some seasons it's dry, and people learn to live with that, and we adjust our lives to the natural world. But Israelis were European, and they came from completely different ecosystems, and they consumed a lot of water. They did not know how to exist in that region with natural resources there, and so they began draining, first of all, the surface waters. There's this amazing river called the Oja River. It was this teeming, roaring river that was full of all kinds of fish species and stuff. It's almost completely gone now. It's like this trickle of sewage remains. There was the Hula wetlands, were this biological ecosystem, this like treasure of biodiversity, and they drained the Hula wetlands. They called it a swamp. It actually happened to be one of the major bird migration hubs of all kinds of bird species that migrated from Africa to Europe and just stopped in Palestine. And they drained it. A lot of bird species, amphibian species, fish species, various flora species that existed nowhere else in the world have gone extinct since they did that. And they drained it. They built a settlement, a Jewish-only colony, and they called it a feat of Jewish ingenuity. And within a few years, and I won't bore you with the biological processes that happened, but essentially there were the nitrogen content, and it created this sort of underground combustible environment that caused underground fires that made them have to like abandon the colony. And there've been like some kinds, some attempts at restoration, but for the most part, the hula wetlands are gone. They're gone forever. And this is just an example of the ecological destruction that they did very early on. In Gaza, and I tried to write about this to some extent, and I actually recently wrote a whole essay in an anthology that's edited by Fatima Buttu about the destruction of animals, the obliteration of wildlife, the obliteration of trees and flora. There was also the Wadi Gaza was also kind of a wetland. It was much smaller than the hula wetlands, but it was also an important bird migration hub, and that they completely destroyed that. All of the birds in Gaza, first of all, their habitats are completely gone. The spiders and the insects that they feed on are gone. And the constant bombing and the constant buzzing has disoriented them, so they act weird. The birds, whatever birds are left, just they don't resemble birds anymore. All the critters are gone. The hedgehogs, the lizards, they're all gone. The trees are all gone. The horses, everything, the flowers, the farms, and what's left are these, miles and miles of rubble, of toxic waste, of human waste, of sewage, rats, strange insects. It's a total ecocide. We're not, we talk about genocide, but there is also scholasticide, the total destruction of an education system. There's cultural side. I'm just making this, I don't even know if it's a word or not, but Israel always they target our schools, they target our museums, our libraries, our databases, our archives. I have a friend whose her grandfather was he was the Mukhtar of Khan Yunis. They were one of the oldest original families in Gaza. And her grandfather had these books, all these ledgers that contained centuries and centuries of marriage records, birth records, divorce records, dispute records, land sales, land purchases, crimes, scandals, stories, and they burned their house. It was in their private library, and it's gone. This is just one family. It's just one example, and so they're obliterating that. They have razed the cemeteries in Gaza. They're doing that in the West Bank too. So they're removing our ancestral presence. They have bombed ancient churches and an ancient mosque in Gaza and all along all the other mosques in Gaza. So they're erasing our past. They are erasing our ancestors, our scholastic work, our history books, our cultural heritage, our archives. There's so many sides. Ecocide, scholasticide, genocide.
I know that Mazin Kemseya writes a lot about ecocide, the Palestinian. I think he's also a biologist.
Mazen Khamseya.
Yeah. And you said before that you visited Gaza, I think twice now during the genocide, and you were planning to go back again, but it's not possible at the moment.
So like everybody else who started watching the genocide early on, I just felt like, what can I do? And like I did in Jenin, that I got the little bit of crazy, and I was like, okay, I got to go there. And my first attempt actually landed me in Egyptian jail in Cairo, and then I found another way. I utilized my medical background, my biologist hat, and went in with a delegation. And I brought in aid. I realized that, okay, there was kind of a loophole. Israel wasn't allowing aid to come in trucks, but some of the delegations could bring in extra luggage. And so I pushed the limits on the first trip, and then on the second trip, I just loaded up the car. I got my own car. I filled the whole car, the whole SUV, and then on the top, I had like, many suitcases on top, and the driver was mad at me because he said I was, putting too much weight on his tires. But nonetheless, we got the supplies in, and of course it's a drop in the bucket. And, like at first I feel, it's like, okay, I did this, now what? And towards the end of my first visit, one of my friends who runs this wonderful center called the Culture and Free Thought Association, she asked me if I would hold a workshop for young people, a writing workshop. And of course I was like, absolutely. And I thought, and she thought, it was just going to be, one thing. One day we did this, it was an enriching thing, and because I had to leave shortly after. But when I sat down with these young people and I realized the kind of risks that they took just to get to the workshop, and I understood how much this workshop meant to them, I think at that moment I decided that we had to do more of this. And I understood that, these are all amazing, brilliant young people. There was a third-year medical student, for example. She's still 3 years later trying to figure out how to finish her medical education. There were other university students. There were there were administrators. There was an aspiring journalist. There were a couple of aspiring writers, but they came from all kinds of backgrounds. And for these young people, Israel didn't just destroy their homes and kill their relatives and put them into tents and reduce them to just trying to get water and food, but they destroyed, and they also destroyed their past, but they destroyed their sense of the future. All of these people had plans for their lives. They all had ambitions. They were planning to get a master's degree or finish medical school or get married or open a business or whatever. And that was suddenly gone. And I realized that these workshops for them, they weren't just writing workshops. They were a place where they could touch the lives that they thought they might still have. And for me, I realized, okay, this is something that I can do. I can impart whatever skills I have as a writer so they can tell their story. And that's what we worked on. And the end result is this wonderful anthology of 18 short stories that depict that depict their reality, that depict their lives. It's a short book. It's English and Arabic. The English portion is less than 100 pages, and so is the Arabic. And it's probably like I'm more proud of that than anything else I've done.
And the title is Moment is Alive, Gaza in the Time of Genocide. Also, you have been, you founded Playgrounds for Palestine, so the right of Palestinian children anywhere to play and to playgrounds. When you also physically or supervise the building of the playgrounds, but then now lately you have started 2 schools in Gaza with friends, which now has around 900 students, the 2 of them together.
Yeah, so Playgrounds for Palestine is something I started like 20 years ago. It's a small organization. We're all volunteers. It's basically me and my friend Hanan right now, who, she's a pharmacist. She has a full-time job, and I'm a writer, and so we both just kind of do this on a volunteer basis. We sell Palestinian olive oil, and whatever money we manage to collect during the year we would use to build playgrounds for Palestinian children. And actually, before the genocide, she and I were like, okay, we're getting old. We're getting too old for this. And we were going to kind of turn our assets over to a larger children's organization. But when the genocide happened, we thought, okay, no, we can't do that. And so we have diverted all of our assets, all the money that we have to educating children, because Palestinian kids have been out of school for 3 years, and it's a really abysmal situation. And so we have 2 schools. We have 877 students right now. We pay teacher salaries, administrator salaries. We built the tents. We had to move the school a couple of times because the areas got bombed and people had to leave. But now we've settled in 2 places. We're about to start 2 more, and hopefully we'll double the number of students. We supply their books, their school supplies, uniforms, and like I said, the faculty for them. And it's like, but it's a small thing. It's, I don't really like to talk about it that much because it kind of reduces the situation to a humanitarian problem instead of like a genocide, a horrific political reality, a moral injury for the whole of humanity. It's not a humanitarian process of a problem. It's a settler colonial genocidal problem.
Yeah, and the problem of the West who doesn't see that.
Yeah.
And
not just the West, but like Arab countries are also quiet. The whole world is quiet, and yeah.
On the topic of being quiet, I just only recently read the novella of Ghassan Kanafani, Man in the Sun, which is basically an allegory of the Palestinian experience, Palestinian story. So occupation, loss, displacement, refugees, genocide now. And the story basically concludes with the driver who in his truck drives 3 people in the water tank, and those 3 men looking for a better life suffocate under the hot sun, and the driver then just repeatedly cries, "Why didn't you knock on the sides of the tank? Why didn't you bang the sides of the tank? Why?
Yeah. Well, we are knocking on the sides of the tank.
For the past 80 years.
Yeah, we have been knocking on the sides of the tank. If you haven't read that novella, it's very short. It's a really important novella. I don't know how we're doing on time. Should we open to Okay. Should we open it to the audience?
I have 2 more questions.
Okay.
So one question was, what are your thoughts on resistance? How does resistance look like for indigenous people, like Palestinians, and on the other hand, for the West?
I mean, I've made my feelings very clear about resistance. First of all, there's all manner of resistance. There's all kinds of avenues that are available for resistance, and to me, at this moment, chief among them is armed and violent resistance. I wholeheartedly embrace that, and I think I am of the belief now that it really is the only way for us. Palestinians have tried everything, even and the world ignores us. And it's really only when we resort to violence that the world even looks at us. Even if they look at us with hatred or contempt or whatever, it is literally the only moment that anybody looks at us. Palestinians are killed every single day. Every single day, our children are dragged into detentions, into gulags, where they are tortured and raped. And this long precedes October 7th. Every day, Palestinian homes are demolished. Every day, our farms are demolished, and our trees are uprooted. Every day, our land is stolen. Every day, our fathers and grandfathers and mothers and sisters are humiliated and degraded at checkpoints. Every day, they are shot, and nobody blinks an eye. No Western media blinks an eye. Nobody covers it. And it is only when we react violently that it becomes news. And so we have a right to resist in any way we see fit. And I get, and I don't want to gloss over that, because I think it's important, because I think sometimes even Palestinians, we kind of internalize this Western contempt for us, and Palestinians will condemn armed resistance, and I don't like that, and I know who these young people are. I have met some of them, and I can tell you that many of these fighters, this is an army of orphans. A lot of these children that you see today, that's who these fighters were yesterday. And they are people of deep faith and deep commitment to their ancestors, deep commitment to this idea of liberation and freedom. People can think whatever they want about them. I can tell you that if you think they are terrorists, I promise you, you have been programmed. You have been utterly brainwashed. And if these were any other people in the world, if you were to see and maybe some of you have seen the images of these young men running up to tanks, sometimes in flip-flops or whatever, this kind of bravery that is epic. I think most, if it were anybody else, people would react in a way that understands the epic heroism of these fighters. But because they are Palestinian, they are seen differently. Because the children who are being murdered and slaughtered are Palestinian, they are seen differently. It has taken longer for people's conscience to be provoked. I think that if a fraction of what Israel did to us were done to them, I think people would have been outraged long before. I think it took the world much longer to react, because it took so many deaths to kind of break through the narratives that the West has been conditioned, that the West has kind of been propagandized into accepting.
Thank you for that. So maybe I will leave my question for the end, and then maybe we can open up the stage for the questions from the audience. We don't see very well because of the light. But if there are any questions, please just.
Recently it was Mrs. Albanese here, maybe half a year ago, something like that. And at the end, I asked her how to oppose this genocide and what to do, how to help. And actually, we concluded we can do actually nothing. It was very astonishing, and I still have.
That's what Francesca said. You can do nothing.
More or less, because we can oppose, we can protest, we can boycott Israel companies and so on, but nothing else. And actually doesn't help. It's too little and too late. And until you have AIPAC lobby in United States and corrupt Congress, I think this is the main reason that nothing happens. And these our people in Brussels, they are completely vassals of United States. So it's very hard to do something. We would like to do something.
Yeah, I mean, Francesca's a friend of mine. I don't, if that's what she conveyed, I definitely do not agree with her. You all have a history of opposing fascism and opposing Nazism, and I think to say that there's nothing you can do is really disempowering. And I believe in collective struggle. I believe, truly, I think collective solidarity with people who are injured, people you may never meet in your life. I believe that is the best human impulse. It is the most noble human impulse that we are capable of. It is morally inspiring. It is morally empowering to all of humanity when people collectively act. You may feel like there's nothing you can do, but you all exist in a part of the world that holds all the power. You are citizens of Europe, and Israel would not exist without Europe. It would not exist without the United States. No part of Israel is utterly and completely dependent on you. It is completely dependent on you believing what they say, on you. It's why Israel invests hundreds of millions of dollars every year on propaganda, on promulgating their story and creating this aura of eternal innocence and democracy and all the other stupid slogans that they shove down everybody's throats. And the reason they do that is because you knowing the truth is dangerous, is because your anger and your outrage is dangerous to them, because they know that actually you do have power. And I think that the trick is you knowing that you have power. They know you do, and they're investing a lot of money into disempowering you, into making you think that you don't have power.
We are just not organized. From one side, Slovenia recognized Palestine, and Slovenia didn't go to Eurovision song. But from the other side, Slovenian government receives weapons from Israel, and our future government, which will come now, months or something like that, they are friends with Israel government. So
look,
what we can do?
Look, I know what your governments are doing, but ultimately, the reason your government actually did what it did was because of pressure from you, because they felt public opinion, right? And doing something, recognizing Palestine, it's a minimal act, right? But it was done to acquiesce, to appease public opinion. And quite honestly, like, I think and I wish Europeans would be angrier and louder and more active and more resolute in your boycott and your rejection of Israel in every way, whether it's, there are simple acts of even just educating yourselves about the reality, not just educating yourselves in a way that becomes sympathetic to Palestinians. It's not, sympathy is different from solidarity. It is part of solidarity is really beginning to recognize the interconnectedness, really finding a way to understand that our liberation is also part of your liberation. If you live in a democracy and yet your will is not being implemented, is that really a democracy? I think you have to ask yourselves this question. And if your government is doing something that is completely oppositional to your moral fiber, is it really a democracy, and do these people represent you? And when you find the answer, your own condition becomes clearer, and your own chains or your own cage becomes clearer. It's it's shedding these delusions that you are steering your political destiny, because you're not, because your political destiny is being steered by Black Cube and by the people who are propagandizing you, by the people who are, creating these Hollywood films and shoving them down your throat and telling you what you need to think about Arabs and Muslims and about Israel. It's in the water you're swimming in. It's the propaganda. I think once you understand this, the ties between the liberation of the global South and your liberation and the concept of the larger human family, the concept of a moral injury, and really thinking about what happens to us collectively as human beings if we let this moment pass. If we let this moment pass where where all of us got to watch the utter decimation of an entire society in full high definition, and we did nothing. That is not going to pass. That is setting the foundations for the next generation. It is setting the foundations of our collective morality. Human beings, you know, at least I always sort of had this sense that human beings were evolving morally. We were evolving towards a future that rejected things like colonialism, that rejected things like genocide, slavery, animal abuse. But this moment of a live stream genocide and an acquiescent public is something that is dragging us all back. And it is a moral injury to all of us. And I think, you know, it's ultimately up to you individually. These are very personal decisions, very intimate decisions that you have with yourself, with your families, with your community, and ultimately collectively with your society is, you know, what kind of world do you want to live in? And do you think that what's happening to us is really, truly separate from your future?
Thank you. My name is Bojan Lakožić. You said that you don't believe in coexistence. I understood that you don't believe in the coexistence of two nations living in Palestine. Do you think, is there any way out of this problem? What is for you the political, what would be for you the political solution of this situation? Maybe my opinion, the South African way out can be also the Palestinian way out of this problem. But first there must be a green light in the West for such solution. And maybe the Palestinians need their Nelson Mandela. There are maybe political too divided. Okay.
Yeah, no, Palestinians don't need a Nelson Mandela. We don't need any specific, we don't need a Gandhi. We don't need all of these things that people say that we have to have in order to be, in order to live with dignity. I don't accept these conditions. These conditions that we have to resist passively, we have to behave a certain way. If we just did this, or if we negotiated, or if we behaved better, if we had a Gandhi, if we had a Mandela, the conditions are always placed on the victims, and this is what I reject wholly outright. Now, when you all went through the experience of Nazism, nobody, I don't think, and your parents were thinking, how do we coexist? Nobody thought that. All of your parents thought, how do we defeat them? How do we end this ideology? So, we're no different. And I reject the idea that we have to start thinking about the feelings of the people who are butchering us for 80 years. We can think about that later, but I want justice and I want accountability, and that is the first thing that has to happen. And I will not think about, I will not negotiate, and I don't want to, and nobody should ask us to do that anymore. We are literally the only people in the world who are expected to watch or experience our own genocide, and at the same time have to watch what we say so we don't hurt the feelings of the people who are committing that genocide. I want them defeated. I want them held accountable. I want an end to this ideology of Jewish supremacy, this idea that every Jewish person in the world is allowed to have an extra country at our expense, and we have to die, or we have to be quiet victims.
We can take one more question.
Well, I must say I quite agree with your militant version of this. I remember when that attack happened 2 years ago of the Palestinians out to the Jewish land. It was just obvious to me that this had to happen one day because of everything before. And also, if you compare this to genocide of the Indians in America, I remember Geronimo's last words were, "We should have fight till the last man was standing." So it's obvious. But my question is now, I don't know what would happen, and maybe you can help me with this, if this didn't occur. So what would be the politics of the Israel against Palestinians? Would genocide happen in this way, or it would just be slowly going on as it was doing before?
No, I don't think so. I think you know, if you listen to Israeli conversations internal, as I do, they have been talking for the past at least 20 to 30 years about how to get rid of us. They have been consumed with what they call the demographic threat. In other words, our babies, the number of babies that Palestinians have, how our population numbers. They have discussed it in their political circles, in their Knesset. They have discussed it in their academic circles, on their television shows, in social circles, in professional circles. It has consumed them. Our presence felt like a threat to them. And they tried a lot of things. Namely, one of the most important was to, and they've said this, was to create, and these are the words of Yitzhak Rabin, we will create conditions that will attract voluntary migration. In other words, they wanted to create conditions for us that were so miserable that we would have to leave. But Palestinians didn't leave. And this is the mistake of every colonizer. They always underestimate the agency of indigenous people. They always underestimate the attachment of indigenous people to the land. And so in Israel, they tried this massive siege on Gaza. They counted the calories of what was allowed into Gaza in order to make Palestinians teeter at the edge of hunger, at the edge of starvation, but not really starve, as so not to attract international condemnation. Israel, in the immediate aftermath of October 7th, started talking about their 9/11 moment, and which made me, in the way they talked about it, coupled to the fact that it was very clear that they knew something was going to happen, and they let it happen, and they stood down for 6 hours. And then what happened wasn't big enough, So they sent 28 Apache helicopters and started firing on all those cars from the Nova Festival. Every single one of those cars, you know, the photos that they show you of the burned out cars, Hamas did not have the kind of weapons that could cause that kind of fire and that kind of damage. All of those cars were hit with Apache helicopter missiles. There were 28 Apache helicopter missiles, Apache helicopters, and they reloaded at least once. They emptied 2 loads each. There were also tanks that went through places like Kibbutz Be'eri that survivors of October 7th talked about, that these tanks killed the people, the Israelis themselves. So we know that Israel killed their own people. The Haaretz, which is the Israeli English language newspaper, did their own investigation and they said at least hundreds of the Israelis who died that day were killed by the Israeli military. Hamas has been asking and calling for an investigation of that day. They have been begging the international community or to have an independent investigation to determine what happened. And they said, whatever you determine that we did wrong, we will punish the perpetrators. The only people who are refusing an actual investigation are Israelis. And so you couple this with the fact that, with the way that Israel then sensationalized the harm and made up these stories about 40 beheaded babies and then this whole, you know, mass rape both of which were thoroughly debunked repeatedly, but nonetheless parroted by Western media without verification. And, you know, these things combined make me believe that Israel wanted this moment thinking they could duplicate what the United States did after 9/11 and then just go in and do whatever the hell they want. And they started doing that. They have been utterly destroying Gaza. They have stepped up the destruction and the appropriation of the West Bank. They are in Lebanon. They invaded Syria and have taken Syrian land. They have instigated a war with Iran. Israel wanted all of these things, and they didn't know how to do it. They didn't know how to effectuate it. And they wanted and needed this moment. And I believe that, so this was always part of the plan. Doing this was always part of the plan. And I think Benjamin Netanyahu is getting older, and they didn't want to just keep doing the slow, incremental colonization. They wanted a big moment, a big spectacular moment. And the problem that they ran into is that things haven't gone as planned. They were, first of all, surprised by the resilience of the Palestinian resistance in Gaza. They were surprised by their capabilities. That's one thing. And the other thing is they were surprised by their loss of the narrative. The journalists on the ground and social media created an avenue for the truth to come through. And they have been struggling ever since to put the genie back in the box. They have assassinated nearly all of the journalists in Gaza, incredibly brave, brilliant, beautiful young people who died trying to tell you the truth. And so they assassinated them to try and stop images from emerging. They bought TikTok. They forced the sale of TikTok in the United States and put it in the hands of Larry Ellison, a major Zionist family. They took over CBS in the United States, also the Ellison family, and they put in Barry Weiss, this raging Zionist, totally unqualified person to head CBS and to promulgate Zionist narratives. They have made deals with Meta to manipulate the algorithms. A lot of us are shadow banned. Palestinians are being completely deplatformed. And content completely removed from places like YouTube. For example, when Saleh al-Jafarawi, the Palestinian journalist, was assassinated, he had hundreds of hours of footage and evidence that was completely obliterated overnight by YouTube. And so that's what they're doing now. They are trying to reverse the loss of the narrative. And so you are going to be bombarded with all kinds of new information, and you are going to be told a totally different story from every direction. That's what's happening, and that's what, yeah. I mean, it was always the plan. It was always the plan to take to, and they tell, and it's not, and this isn't my opinion. I mean, they tell us, they're talking. I mean, Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, Netanyahu, they all talk about the Greater Israel Project. They all talk about, God, this real estate deity, gave them, everything from the Nile to the Euphrates. As a matter of fact, their flag, the two blue stripes with the star in between. Do you know what that means? So one stripe is the Nile, the other stripe is the Euphrates. It's a symbol of their ambition, and everything in between is dominated by, the Star of David. So that has always been their goal. It has always been their ambition. Netanyahu, coming towards the end of his life, wanted to accelerate it and effectuate it.
We have to slowly. So we have to slowly end, unfortunately, our conversation. Just to let you know that in case you haven't got one yet, you can buy Mornings in Jenin, torej jutra v Jeninu, tukaj za ovinkom. Cankarjeva založba jih prodaja. Susan will also, she kindly said that she will sign the books. If you brought them with you, if you're going to buy them anyway, if you have other books by her, she will also sign them. But maybe just to conclude, you spoke a little bit about what liberation looks like for you, and we've been talking about it today a little bit. But just let me ask you again, because so we are living in the time of climate crisis, and wars and genocide fuel climate crisis. So this is the biggest threat that we are facing as a humanity in general, and a lot of species together with us, and we are the ones responsible for that, what is happening. And a lot of struggles, or most of the social struggles that are going on in the world today are interconnected. So they have ties one to another, climate, labor, feminist, anti-colonial, animal rights. And they definitely have to come and walk side by side or hand in hand. So what would you say on that? What would you feel what does liberation look like for you? How do you envision a liberated world? It's a big question.
Sorry, that cough is coming back now.
We will finish.
Sorry. I'm going to try and answer. It's a I think Greta Thunberg. Sorry, I'm going to have to cough. Yeah, I apologize.
Yeah. Just cough. But yeah, Susan has been speaking a lot also about the climate change activists, especially the young ones that have the great example in Greta Thunberg.
Yeah. So, all of these struggles are interconnected. Sorry for my voice. It sounds so weird hearing myself like this. And colonialism and capitalism are necessarily extractive. And that's why if we allow this to happen, the level of extraction, the level of environmental destruction will just be accelerated. To me, so sorry, like it's just in my throat. Just give me a minute, sorry.
It's okay.
Man, getting old sucks. So it's like all these things keep going wrong in my body all the time. Liberation to me begins with justice. Not just justice for people, but justice for the trees, justice for those decapitated mountains, justice for the birds, for the animals. Palestine used to be, before Israel came along, Palestine was a multi-religious, multi-ethnic, multicultural, pluralistic society. It was, in my opinion, the ideal that the West claims to embrace. A return to that feels like liberation to me. A return to a reverence for the land, a symbiotic relationship with the land, a sustainable, loving relationship with the land feels like liberation to me. A train that runs from Jerusalem to Beirut, to Tripoli, Damascus, Baghdad, Kuwait, Tehran, that feels like liberation to me. Open borders. The Epstein class getting the guillotine feels like liberation to me. You know, I say that tongue in cheek and you laugh, but I think we are living in the time of monsters, and I think they are monsters. And I think they need to be held to account, and I think they should be punished in the harshest ways. That feels like liberation to me. None of us can hope for a better future as long as these are the people, these degenerate, depraved people are the ones setting the infrastructure of our lives and of our future.